What do you think Joseph Smith's intentions were with the Book of Mormon? How do you see him as a prophet?
I just talked about being respectful of people's time, and now we've got to spend half an hour digging into why did Joseph Smith do it? Why? Just possibly the biggest question is like, why did he do it? This is not what I would have thought even like a year ago.
Mhm.
I've kind of changed a lot about my views. I think. Hi everyone, it's Nemo here, and I have a great guest lined up. It's been a while since I've had a guest, but I was just waiting for the right person, and this certainly is the right person. You may know him from his absolutely stellar video that took off, where he describes reading the Book of Mormon for the first time as an atheist. This is a brand new type of video, I guess, where I'm reacting to someone else's video, but I've got that person whose video I'm reacting to come onto the show and talk about it. So, everyone, please welcome a man who shares a surname with the author of the book he's just read, Jared Smith.
Thanks so much for having me, Nemo. And yes, my last name is Smith, which means I might be related to Brigham Young. That's right.
Mm.
100%.
Definitely Brigham Young.
You don't have to include that. So
Oh, that's getting included for sure.
that's getting included. Okay.
So, okay, to set the scene for people, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the video that you just did that has popped off pretty well, like it's done very well. And then I, being that guy, I'm going to correct some of the things that you said. I'm very sorry in advance, but I'm also kind of not sorry because that's my shtick.
Mhm.
And then I think you can ask me some questions then about the Book of Mormon as well. Find out any thoughts you might have about the Book of Mormon and any questions you might have. So let's kick it off. Jared, tell us about the video you just did.
I am an atheist. For those who don't know me and my shtick, normally my thing is that I go and explore weird religious communities and occasionally cults. And so I have a series called Atheist Church Audit. This is the first video that I've done in a while where I'm not reviewing a church, but I'm reviewing a book.
Ooh,
And so I had this delivered to my doorstep by a couple of LDS missionaries. I actually did go through the rigmarole of like specially requesting a book
nice.
from the website. And yeah,
Nice.
they knocked on my door and it was really sweet.
Okay, so if you
So
had to give it a review on Amazon out of 5, what would you give it?
you know how you can like break up reviews based on like content, accuracy,
Mhm.
tone, entertainment value. Entertainment value, I'd give it a I'd give it a 3 out of 5.
Okay.
How fun it is to read, I'm gonna give it a 1. How
Okay.
accessible it is, also a 1. Um, how interesting the context of the book is, 5, 5.5.
And you didn't hold back in your review, to be fair. And I appreciate that you kind of started out by trying to clear the Mormon crowd. You were
Mhm.
like, there's going to be all kinds of things in this video, so clear the decks if you're a believing Mormon, which is fair.
And I mean, it also is like, I'm genuinely not trying to make fun of anyone for
Mhm.
what they believe. I think that there are perfectly valid reasons that a person comes to believe that the Book of Mormon is true, or any host of number of things that I don't think is true. But I don't think that that means that the people are silly or ignorant or anything like that. There are wonderfully smart and intelligent people who think that it's true. Um, but at the same time, I understand that like when I was younger and a devout Christian, um, I got defensive or in a bad headspace, or it was uncomfortable to hear people challenge my beliefs like that. And there were times where, yeah, I wish I could have spared myself um, some of that uncomfortableness,
Mhm.
at least until I was ready.
Okay. So, do you want the good news or the bad news about your video, first of all? Which is linked in the description if people want to go watch it, and I recommend that they do go watch it. We will be putting clips into this throughout. Actually, I should say, before we go to the good news or the bad news, this all started because you tagged me in a video. Like us talking before you made this video, us talking behind the scenes has been going on for a little while. And the reason that happened is because you tagged me in a video.
And Nemo the Mormon was just excommunicated. What the f, y'all? Nemo, if you're watching this, you're my hero. Please be my friend.
And that's all I need is just a kind invite, and I'll come be your friend. So, yeah. I was then Jared's friend, and we've chatted about Mormonism, and we've talked through some stuff, and then you told me you were going to be doing this video, so I was always excited to see it come out, and I thought, right, I've got to get Jared on and talk to him about it, and be the guy who, as a friend, can point out in good faith the places where you didn't quite get it right, the places where I think you did really well, and all that sort of stuff. So, good news or bad news, Jared?
Hit me with the bad news. Yeah, let's go with the bad news.
Right. Well, we might not have time left for the good news, but no. Okay. So, right. You said the narrative of the Book of Mormon runs from 600 BC to 400 AD, roughly.
My misconception was that, oh, it's all from one era. But no. According to Joseph Smith, these plates reflect ancient writings that were written between the years 600 BC and 400 AD, roughly, thereabouts.
I'm not sure roughly gives you the wiggle room to ignore the fact that the narrative of the Jaredites in Ether starts in 2200 BC.
Oh, you did get me there. I actually just went back and reread just the Book of Ether because somebody brought up to me the wooden submarines.
Yeah.
And I was like, what are you talking about? I don't remember that. And so I go back and I'm like, oh, that's what that was talking about. And
Tight
the top
like
was
unto a
tight
dish.
like unto a dish.
Yeah.
The sides were tight like unto a dish.
Yeah. And there couldn't be any windows. And Brother Jared's like, what are windows?
So yeah, I do remember reading that, and I was like, wait a minute, if that's the Tower of Babel era, then that does seem like it's before 600 BC. So notwithstanding the Book of Ether, am I right though?
Yeah. Your dates are right. Other than that, but there's just that bit that is added near the end of the book that then adds an extra like 2,500 years or 2,000 years onto it or whatever. And and it's also the Book of Ether in which millions of people die at the Hill Cumorah, a hill that they've checked archaeologically and it's just like clean, right? So there's like 2.5 million bodies they're looking for currently, that died in this battle. It's a lot of people.
The estimate of 2.5 million, does the text explicitly say there were
the
that
text
many
lays
people?
out so and so and his 100,000 soldiers, so and so and his 100,000 soldiers. And you know how in that style the Book of Mormon does. You're probably glazed over reading that bit, I'm sure, and I'm sure there are many points reading the Book of Mormon which you kind of just glazed over. Don't blame you in the slightest. It is repetitive. For a book that talks about, oh, if only we had the room to write this down, we would have. They didn't half waste a lot of room writing down stuff they didn't need to, which I think your review points to. And this is not a bashing session of the Book of Mormon, and we will get to, Jared's point of view. I guess I'm just a bit more comfortable with it being my religious background and my sacred text, just being a bit more glib about it, right? And Jared's lovely and tries to be really respectful, and I'm just here like, So
it's your family feud. I
exactly
totally
right. I can call my brother all sorts of names, but if you do, there will be issues. Yeah. You mentioned, and I love the fact that you mentioned this. This is a good thing. So I'm doing like the sandwich, right? We'll go back and forth to some things.
A nice Oreo.
A nice Oreo of good news and bad news.
Criticism, praise.
You are very astute pointing out the fact that Book of Mormon runs cycles of people are bad, so then God punishes them, so then they're good again, and then they get proud because they're flourishing. You use the phrase prosper in the land.
If you do good things, you will prosper and succeed in the land, and great will be your rejoicing.
I was like, man, this guy has definitely read the book, because that's such an iconic Book of Mormon phrase. Which, by the way, side note, I thought your impression of the Book of Mormon about your Diet Cola, very good.
Thank you.
I'm going to do my best, Book of Mormon impression. Yea, verily I say unto thee, that Jared drank the Diet Cola. Truly he drank unto it, and it was good. And it was pleasing unto his taste buds, because it came to pass, that as he drank the cola, he felt gassy, and he belched. Yea, verily its sweetness was not from sugar, but verily it was truly due to aspartame. Neither was it sweetened with the sweetness of agave, nor with brown sugar. Much joy, and there was much rejoicing in the seed of Jared, for great was the joy that Jared had in the household of Jared.
I thought it would be interesting to tell you that actually that cycle you talked about is taught in the church. It is taught as a theme. So it's called the Pride Cycle.
Hmm.
And there is a cycle. I'll read it. So step 1 is forgetting the Lord, pride and wickedness. Then there's suffering and destruction, which leads to remembering the Lord, humility, and then repentance, which leads to righteousness and prosperity. But the Lord lets them prosper, knowing that that's then going to make them proud, and the cycle starts over again. Right? And it's just kind of like a futility of human success.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know that I have any like issues with that kind of on a technical level, because I mean, even on a secular level, right? You could say that that probably is true,
Yeah.
right?
And people are encouraged in lessons to look to the world and see where they see examples of that. You know,
Sure.
it's true. What's say? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Is that
Right.
the old adage, right? So
Mhm.
Joseph Smith picked up on a theme, and he talks about it in Doctrine and Covenants as well. He
Mm.
says, we have learned by sad experience that is the nature and disposition of almost all men. As soon as they get a little power, as they see it, that they begin to exercise unrighteous dominion, I think is the quote. So it's essentially like the moment anyone gets any power, they begin to exercise it unrighteously, and it's our job to kind of like to deal with those people, and try and stop that from happening.
Mhm.
So you spotted a theme. There's a big theme in Mormonism, just more generally, about the powerful or people becoming powerful, then becoming proud, and it's just so ironic that the church has become so wealthy, and people can't see that the leadership of the church have actually entered the stage of this pride cycle. You could argue, or I would certainly argue. But back to your mistakes, Jared. Back to your
Can I give like a caveat first? So
yeah.
to kind of set the stage for, my whole video, because I know that a lot of Latter-day Saints who are like hate watching this right now,
Uh-huh.
and who hate watched my video, they might interpret it as like a Book of Mormon takedown video,
Hmm.
and that's genuinely from the bottom of my heart not my intent.
Hmm.
Um, I I have a very big mouth, and I have very real hot takes, and I can't, muzzle myself. And so all of this is like, I have a theological background. This is my initial impressions of the book.
Hmm.
This is like, hey, I've read this book once. Here's what I thought, which is exactly what every Latter-day Saint missionary asks people to do.
Yeah.
Um, it's like I, I'm not. I'm not signing up for the task of trying to systematically dismantle the Book of Mormon.
Hmm.
I'm just doing the thing that is always asked of people.
Hmm.
Give it a first pass, and
Yeah.
then come back and, hey, we'll talk about it some more. So
Mhm.
I'm excited to continue to learn and have my thoughts challenged and refined, both by Latter-day Saints and by the ex-mo crowd.
Yeah.
Very honored to be a fly on the wall in this discussion.
Well, and I think it's really important that you gave those first impressions out into the world and you put them out there and you were like,
Mhm.
okay, this is because I think Mormons can get so in a bubble about what they think happens when they give that book to people because they see one of two
Mm.
results and they often
Yeah.
see it from their own perspective, right? They see either someone takes the challenge and really flies with it and becomes a member of the church, and that's great, or they see someone read it, not get the spiritual answer they expect. I've literally just done a video on this, and they just don't know what to do with that because it's
Right.
fundamentally challenging to their worldview, and that's why you gave people an opportunity not to watch a video because that's important. That they don't have to have their worldview challenged if they don't want to, right?
Yeah.
There's some sort of consent there. Um, and I mean, I take that slightly differently. I'm like, well, people can always just turn off my video, or
Right.
right?
Right.
That's kind of my approach with it, but I appreciate yours. But all that is to say that actually having an unfiltered, like, this is what happens when someone who doesn't have the underlying assumption of a belief in God reads this book. Because I think
Mhm.
Moroni's promise, which again I've just been talking about, right? That almost presupposes that you believe in a deity of some sort, and then you think that deity is going to give you an answer about the Book of Mormon. Similarly, I think one of the reasons Mormonism struggles to sell itself is that it used to be selling a product to an already religious crowd, and
Sure.
now it's not in places like Europe where it's increasingly secular. They're and it they don't know how to sell Mormonism to non already religious people
Right.
generally,
Right.
particularly because the community's been killed off and all that sort of stuff that we could get into. But I think that's one of the reasons why missionary work isn't doing as well in Europe, but it's doing very well in Africa, in places where people are already have this underlying religious worldview.
Yep.
So it's good to have a take of someone who's an atheist going, well, this is what happens when you present it to someone who doesn't have the presupposition that this, like you say it in the video, you're like, to me, it's just obvious this isn't true. Like to you, that's just like, you're not trying to disprove it. To you, it's just kind of obvious that it isn't.
Right.
And that's coming from just that initial perspective of like, well, I don't believe in a God, so I'm not going to believe in a book of divine scripture. And so I'm kind of seeing it from this perspective. Is that fair?
Yeah. No, I mean, 100%. And, you know, for somebody who has a pretty widespread interest in the Abrahamic religions, I would say that, like, a lot of people don't really realize how often this happens, that somebody comes on the scene and claims to speak for God. And all of those people have some kind of proof that they give, some kind of testimony as to why they ought to be believed, whether there's a healing that accompanies their revelation, or a miracle of some kind. You know, they changed the weather or whatever. And so with all of those, I'm kind of starting from a place where I'm like, yeah, I don't think he's really talking for God. And Christians and Mormons do the same thing. If I were to tell you about the public universal friend, you have to look them up after this video. There's a person in, I believe, the 1800s referred to as the PUF, the PUF, public universal friend.
Right.
And they were they were literally non-binary. They were a genderless person in the 1800s who claimed to be, I'm going to get this so wrong, but they were like, you know, some great priest who came on the scene basically. And I don't know if they thought that they were the reincarnation of Jesus or the chosen one or something, but you know, it's just like there's countless people like that who come on the scene, and it's like, yeah, I don't know that I can prove it. I don't know that I have the wherewithal to give you a systematic formula as to why it's not true. I'm just kind of like, yeah, probably not. And Christians and Mormons do that to everyone outside of their what's
Well, there we go. We got a little timer coming in.
yeah. Oh man. What's going on? Okay. That's weird. All right. Still
We're
going?
back.
You can still see me?
Yeah.
Sorry about that, man. That's annoying.
It's all right.
But with that, it's like, you know, every Christian and every Mormon does that to everyone outside of their worldview. They do that to the Prophet Muhammad. They do that to Sweet Daddy. They do that to every person who comes on the scene and claims to talk for God. And they're just starting from that place of like, yeah, probably not. And that's how I'm looking at Latter-day Saints and Joseph Smith.
It's that Ricky Gervais thing, right? Of like, there have been 3,000 gods or whatever it is he says. It's like, you don't believe in 2,999 of them. You believe in your God. I
Right.
just don't believe in one more. From his position as an atheist, right? And it is, if anyone wants to get themselves in the shoes of someone like yourself, or gets close to, they're like, I just can't understand how you don't believe it. They just need to sit and think about a God they don't believe in and be like, okay, well, that person just feels that way about my God,
Yeah.
or my religious text, or whatever it is. It's
Exactly.
quite simple to try and get yourself in that sort of empathetic mindset if you're willing to entertain it. But we've been saying too many nice things about you, Jared. We need to now
Yeah, give it to me straight. I'm an idiot and I need to be reprimanded.
I mean, I don't know quite how you even managed to say that Moroni appeared to Joseph Smith and revealed the gold plates and then used pictures of Jesus. Like, what?
Ooh, did I?
Yeah, you use footage from the first vision because you've got Jesus' hands showing the nail prints.
And the angel Moroni shows Joseph Smith where to go to dig up these plates.
And it's clearly from Joseph Smith, Prophet of the Restoration. It's from that film. You've got footage of Christ appearing to him in the sacred grove. Joseph all like this. Because if you want the appearance of Moroni, that happens in Joseph's bedroom with a picture that will now be on screen. And then you also said Martin Harris or Emma were translating. You missed Oliver Cowdery.
I knew it. I knew that, but I was just
He was like the
going
principal
fast or
scribe.
loose.
He
Was he?
like
Oliver Harris
he
was?
did most. Oliver Cowdery did most
Oliver
of it.
Cowdery.
Because
Okay.
Martin Harris got the sack kind of because he took the 116 pages back
To his
wife. And she was like, well, I'm keeping these. And he's like, well, please don't. And she's like, well, too bad. Joseph will have to retranslate them and then we'll see. And Joseph's like, haha, no, I will just later translate something that basically tells the same story but isn't the same. So, yeah, no, thank you.
I always think back to that, and it's like, how did South Park actually get it right?
Oh, because
Like,
this material is out there.
yeah.
Like, the only reason that they would have found it easier now, but essentially they're looking for the story of Mormonism without the blinkers on of most Mormons, which is must only look at church-approved sources, don't look
Mhm.
at what the Tanners wrote, or don't look at the God Makers by Ed Deck, or any of these things, right? They're just blinkers on, only look at approved church material, which in like the 70s and 80s was really strictly, tightly controlled. Church curriculum is the same throughout the world, that sort of thing, right?
Got it.
If I go to even now, if I go to a lesson in Germany, German-speaking congregation, I'll be on the same lesson as I would be in the UK. It's just in German.
Is that like an annual, almost like liturgy, that like it just repeats itself over and over again, or is that
Well,
like
no, so
straight
that's for
from the
Sunday
first
school. So the
presidency?
lesson manual for Sunday school that year will
Mhm.
be the Book of Mormon. We'll be studying the Book of Mormon for that year in the second
Right.
hour of church, and that will, be that lesson manual. So you'll be on that lesson for that week,
I
and then
see.
it rotates through the 4 books of Scripture. So it
Got
goes
it.
Book of Mormon 1 year, then Doctrine and Covenants, then Old Testament, then New Testament, then which means we only study the life of Jesus
Mhm.
through the New Testament every 4 years.
Man, I need to get myself a quad. I've realized that those are a thing, and
Yeah, I have a quad.
they're so hefty.
They are hefty. You should get yourself one, definitely.
I'm going to open
Um,
a PO box for myself and
mhm.
literally just hope that somebody sends me a quad.
All right. Well, you just get some well-meaning Mormon who'll send you a really lovely, like they're leather bound and stuff. They are really nice.
Yeah.
You can get them thumb indexed and all sorts. It's yeah, it's good. So, okay, I only brought up that really again. All this is nitpicky, right? You did a fine
Mhm.
job, Jared. But hell, I'm going to let you get away with it because. But the 116 pages does bring me to something which you astutely pointed out. Again, credit to you that everyone's like obsessed with the Jesus prophecies, and
Right.
everyone knows like exactly when he's turning up.
Mhm,
And Nephi's
mhm.
like it's going to be 600 years, but there is more to that. Did
Okay.
you notice that after Mosiah, for a bit, everyone got really sort of foggy about when he was going to turn up?
No, no.
Okay, so right, and this is where we're going to get into some details here. Okay, because you brought some of the scriptures up. Now, Brent Metcalfe has done essays on this. I encourage people to look it up. I'm going to try and put some links in the description. People look at his work, but it is essentially accepted by the church now on the church website. It's accepted by the church that the way the Book of Mormon was written isn't just from First Nephi through to the end. So those 116 lost pages were written first,
Mhm.
and then Joseph went, "Well, I can't rewrite them, so I'm just going to carry on." So he carried on from where he was in Mosiah, and just carries on to the end of the book, and then goes back and translates the small plates of Nephi, which forms First, Second Nephi, Words of Mormon, Jacob, Enos, Jerem, and Omni, and then Words of Mormon. Right? He's got all that he does after Mormon, Moroni, etc.
So he kind of starts at Mosiah. So the
The
116
book that
pages
we
were lost.
have now, yeah. So
Mhm.
the 116 pages were lost. So he then starts at Mosiah,
Okay. Okay.
writes the
And
book,
then
and then comes
goes
back
through.
and does First, Second Nephi through to Words of Mormon.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's why all the prophecies. Well, that could
Oh, I
explain why all
see.
the prophecies in First, Second Nephi, etc., are also accurate. So, as an example, right, First Nephi 19:8 says, "And behold, he cometh according to the words of the angel in 600 years from the time my father left Jerusalem." But then Alma says, Alma 13:25 says, "And now we only wait to hear the joyful news declared unto us by the mouth of angels of his coming. For the time cometh, we know not how soon." But why doesn't he know? If
Interesting.
the whole point of Nephi going back to get the brass plates was to then take them with them so the word would be preserved, and he preserved the writings, and the whole point of the Book of Mormon is these writings have been preserved between prophets
Mhm.
generations. Why is Alma the prophet historian like, I don't know when he's going to turn up? Nephi was very specific about it, but I don't know.
Interesting.
Similarly, King Benjamin is
Interesting.
also a bit less specific. He says the time cometh soon when it would actually be 120 years after him that
Yeah.
Christ
Yeah.
would come. Similarly,
Hmm.
Nephi says that Christ will come and meet with the people. 2 Nephi 26:9. But the Son of Righteousness shall appear unto them, and he shall heal them, which we see in 3 Nephi Acts of Christ healing the people. And they shall have peace with him, and until 3 generations have passed away, etc. But then again, Alma 7:8. Behold, I do not say that he will come among us at the time of his dwelling in his mortal tabernacle. For behold, the Spirit hath not said unto me that this should be the case. Now as to this thing, I do not know. So he doesn't know if Christ is going to come and visit among them, but Nephi did in 2 Nephi.
I have to like pause there and give
Yeah.
my my hot take about that.
Uh-huh.
I feel like, one of the biggest retorts to my video from Latter-day Saints will be like,
Mhm.
well, how many fiction writers were able to churn out this many pages of material in,
Mhm.
what was it, like 90 days or something insane.
Well, it's not even that, because like he was telling some of these stories for years before he started writing them down. Like he used to
I
entertain
see.
his mother at the dinner table with stories of ancient peoples, right?
I see.
So some of
I
this
see.
headcanon could have been developing for years.
So even granting that, because I'm wanting to
Mhm.
compliment Mormons,
Yeah.
I like there is something incredible about all this. Even if I think that the form factor that the Book of Mormon eventually took, like the fact that anyone was able to churn this out,
Mhm.
I'll give credit where credit's due and say like, yeah,
I
it's a
couldn't do it.
lot to keep track of. Yeah, no, like I've,
Mhm.
at one point I, had memorized the entire book of First Peter, right? But that took a long time. It's only 5
Mhm.
chapters. It's not crazy.
Yeah.
But that took a lot. So for him to develop this entire canon in his
Mhm.
head, this entire world, and then keep track of the insane number of dates and people and
Mhm.
lineages, like there is something like truly impressive about it. Does it start to sound so impressive that only God could do it? I'm not entirely sure
No.
about that.
Yeah, and I think there are things like this, starting with Mosiah, that show ways in which Joseph could have written it. I mean, there's indicators throughout the text that make it
Mhm.
look like a dictated text,
Right.
where he goes back and makes like verbal corrections, which you just wouldn't make in a written text. Like you wouldn't go back and go, "That is to say," da 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 da. You would
Hmm.
just write what you mean the first time if you're writing it down. If you're not
Yeah.
doing like a just a consciousness flow. Like when you're writing something down, particularly when you're then going to engrave it on plates, you
Yeah.
wouldn't immortalize you going, that is to say, and then kind of correcting yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've even heard one scholar um, talk about how, like, and then it came to pass. Most likely was just his filler word as he was kind of
Yeah.
improvising. Um, that's such a fascinating idea to me.
Mhm.
It's just his antiquated version of
Um,
Yeah. And then it
yeah.
came to pass.
That in the third year they did dwell even unto the fourth year. Right, yeah, they'll do. And then, yeah, like some of these even unto the fourth and unto the fifth and unto the sixth and unto
Right. Right.
that's just a way of putting more words out there.
Hmm.
Like you said, it kind of meanders and uses a lot of words to say very little sometimes.
Right.
And I think again that's kind of indicative of it being a spoken text.
Yeah.
Someone who's formulating and putting this on the page as they speak. You talked about the anachronisms. You said you didn't want to get into that, but you did mention horses, and that brings me to my favorite topic. Are you aware of the apologetic about horses, Jared?
Yes, somebody asked me about this recently. I watched your video on it. The trapiers,
Tapirs. Tapirs.
tapirs.
Yeah.
They don't look like horses to me. Like,
No, I still can't believe I convinced a zoo to let me in the enclosure with one to make a video about it.
I
Like,
didn't actually. I don't think I realized that that's what had happened.
yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
actually like think
I
through like, oh,
emailed a
how did we get
zoo
this
and I was
footage?
like, I want to make a video about tapirs. Will you let me in the enclosure, please? And loads of zoos were like, oh, we're talking to our like insurance team, we're talking to like these people, we're talking to our media teams who'll let you in. And I'd gone to some of the bigger zoos, and then I went to like a really small one in the southwest of England, and I was like, like a very small little zoo. I was like, you've
Yeah.
got a tapir. Will you let me in? They're like, yeah, sure, why not? So like I just went in, climbed over the fence, got my camera, set it up, like was filming myself talking to camera and all that sort of stuff, and then interviewed the keeper. And I asked the keeper, like, could one of those pull a chariot? And he's like, no, not really. Yeah. So it's not a very well performing video. If you're watching this, go watch that.
Yeah.
It didn't perform. I loved making it, and I felt like, yeah, it kind of
I
puts
thought
to
it was
bed a
fascinating.
lot of it.
So tell me this then, because
Mhm.
like I can imagine, as an outsider trying to gauge like the temperature in the room,
Mhm.
uh, in creationist science land, you have people like, what's his name? He's an Australian guy. He's referred to in the atheist community as Banana Man, because he tried to claim that like proof of design intelligence can be seen in the banana, and that banana, it
Ah,
has
banana fits
ridges.
the hand perfectly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know
Um,
who you mean. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
gonna bug the mess out of me that I can't
I've
remember
seen the
his name.
video. Yeah.
Behold, the atheist's nightmare. Now, if you study a well-made banana, you'll find on the far side there are 3 ridges. On the close side, 2 ridges. If you get your hand ready to grip a banana, you'll find on the far side there are 3 grooves, on the close side 2 grooves. The banana and the hand are perfectly made one for the other. You'll find the maker of the banana, Almighty God, has made it with a non-slip surface. It has outward indicators of inward contents: green, too early; yellow, just right; black, too late.
That was respectably a very fringe argument. No legit apologist would make that argument. How well established is this argument that horses translates to tapirs, or
Oh,
vice versa?
very well and very seriously. So there's a guy called
Really?
Dan Peterson who kind of espoused it. And he was trying to say, like, actually, people who laugh at this are just quite ignorant about anthropology and about lone shifting and blah, blah, blah.
The suggestion that a tapir is referred to in the Book of Mormon by the word horse has been met with a lot of ridicule from a lot of people who, it strikes me, are actually fairly ignorant of anthropology and linguistics.
Okay, the problem, Dan, is even if you argue that the Nephites just didn't know what to call these things and so called them horses, the problem is with what they're described in the text as doing. They're described in the text as pulling chariots, as being used as beast of burden, as domesticated animals. And that's just not ever been the tapir's relationship to human beings.
Yeah.
They don't have the
Yeah.
temperament for it. They're very easily frightened. I was in the enclosure. It took a while before I could even get close to it and go sit. And the keeper always had to be with me and basically just feeding branches to the tapir the whole time. They just want belly rubs all the time, and they're like, cool.
Well, now I want one.
Yeah, I mean, they're great,
Back
but
with the
they're just not,
apologetics arguments. I just want one.
they're not very domesticatable. So the point is, like, they're making all these highfalutin arguments about, like, oh, hippopotamus means river horse because it doesn't look like a horse, etc. But that's what it got called, and prairie dogs and blah blah blah. So he's like, oh, you don't understand like how words work. I'm like, no. The problem isn't that you would call something that isn't a horse. I get that. Fine. The natives in the Americas, when horses first arrived, called them deer, right? Because they look like deer. Cool, no issue.
Yeah.
But it's the problem with the text describing the tapirs as doing things that tapirs wouldn't do is the issue there. But it is otherwise a very serious argument. Jazmin Rapoli from Scripture Central, or no, she doesn't work with them anymore, but she would make that argument seriously. She's one of the church's big defenders at the moment on social media.
This is a horse. Doesn't look like a horse, doesn't function like a horse, not really genetically related to horses. But the word hippo literally means horse.
So
got it.
It's not fringe, it's not like Banana Man.
Okay.
Rod Meldrum is like the Banana Man of Mormonism. If you look into any of his stuff, like he talks about the Earth having an ice core and all this sort of stuff, right? He's
fun stuff.
If I'm remembering correctly, yeah.
Ray Comfort. That's Banana Man, by the way.
Ray Comfort. Okay. Nice, Banana Man. Okay, so the last thing I need to talk to you about, other than that, those are the only things I kind of spotted in your video where I was like, oh, okay, those are like sort of factual errors or maybe things you didn't quite fully explore. Was I really wanted to pick up on something and then move into this conversation where you can ask me some questions, particularly. Sure. You talked about how it was disappointing for you that the Book of Mormon was so like, how have you described it? I don't want to put words in your mouth there.
Boring.
Boring. Okay, fine. The Book of Mormon was so boring because you are fascinated by Mormons and you like Mormon people and you have enjoyed your experiences in Mormonism once you got over your initial traumatic fast and testimony meeting experience, right?
Yeah.
Basically, you went to a YSA meeting or a YA meeting and you're like, oh, the cool young people are around. This is better,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which is fair. I have a reason why I think this might be. You might be feeling a disconnect between the Book of Mormon not living up to Mormonism as you've experienced it, because as you've noted, the Book of Mormon is pretty thin
Mhm.
theologically.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's some stuff in there about infant baptism. There's some stuff in there about actual baptism, and for some reason, all these people that existed before Christ are all Baptists and baptizing in His name, as you pointed out. That's strange.
Mhm.
These sort of pre-Christ Christians. A lot of Mormonism's theology that actually comes from the Doctrine and Covenants and comes from later
Yes.
revelations by Joseph Smith. Right?
Yeah.
Joseph Smith famously didn't really preach from the Book of Mormon, particularly.
Mm.
He preached a lot from the Bible, and so Mormonism, as it exists today, is sort of a product like the Book of Mormon is less a theological guide for Mormonism and more a proof of Mormonism's truthfulness because God gave Joseph a record to translate, and that's the USP, right? It's more proof that Joseph Smith is a translating prophet of God rather
Yeah.
than it is a kind of theological text in some ways, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Does that
that's
make sense?
actually, yeah. There's several things there. So that's one thing that I didn't put in my video that I should have. Because I came to the end of it, and maybe it was even after I recorded the video that I was like, wait a minute. All of the things that I learned about Mormonism as an evangelical, I don't remember any of that stuff.
Mhm.
Jesus and Satan being brothers,
Yeah.
Kolob,
Mhm.
the celestial progression, eternal marriages. I don't remember any of that. Did I
That's
forget
all
about it?
Doctrine and Covenants and Pearl of
That's
Great
all
Price.
later.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I think that had I read that stuff in there as well, I actually would have given the Book of Mormon a higher review
Mhm.
because that's kind of the interesting things that I'm intrigued by.
Yeah.
I've had some really like fascinating conversations with LDS missionaries where like they sort of start to hint at that and the mother god stuff and the stuff that they know is like very speculative and tentative. And I'm like, I'm actually really intrigued by that. As an outsider, I'm like, that's a unique take that a lot of other denominations don't have. And so the fact that the Book of Mormon was just boring
Mhm.
and it didn't have much theological depth, I think that was what made it so underwhelming for me.
Yeah. And this is where again I was talking about how Mormonism struggles to sell itself to non-religious people.
Mhm, mhm.
Like back in the day, it was like, oh, you're a Methodist and you feel like there's something missing. Well, we've got this doctrine about eternal families and eternal progression and deification
Sure.
and kolob and Heavenly Mother. We've got all this extra stuff. But
Hmm.
now Mormonism's having to become bedfellows with the rest of Christianity because it's kind of like an enemy of my enemy is my friend situation, where they're
Right.
like, we've been calling the Catholic Church like the whore of the earth for a while, but like I guess now we have to play nice because they support us when it comes to legislative issues. So
Oh.
I guess we're gonna have to tone down a lot of our like weird USPs, which
When you
I've
say
you gone
USP, what is a USP?
unique selling point.
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
So,
Okay.
like, when you're marketing a product, you talk about the USP of that product, right? What's the thing that makes that product special?
I'm in marketing.
And
I should know this.
yeah, and maybe it's a particularly British phrase. I don't know, but let me know in the comments. But Mormonism is like its thing was that it's God's one true church, and it's the thing that annoyed evangelicals, amongst other things, right? Other than just things that deeply offended them theologically. But like
Yeah.
it's the thing that upset other religions towards Mormonism for a long time was this distinct claim that like Brad Wilcox said it recently, who's a church leader. He said in a meeting that was kind of recorded and leaked, but he said it publicly to a group of people. He said other churches are just playing church. They want it to count. They're sincere, but they don't have God's authority.
They'd play church. And I used to think, oh, that's so cute. It's so cute. But now I'm older and I realize it wasn't just cute. It's actually what most people in the world are doing. They're playing church. They're sincere. They want it to count, but they don't have the authority. They don't have God's permission.
That used to be what like underpinned Mormonism. This sense of like, okay, no, we have the whole truth. And again, like that's why the Book of Mormon is important, because it would prove that Joseph Smith is a prophet who restored God's one true church, and then through
Yeah.
continuing revelation laid it all out through the Doctrine and Covenants and the Pearl of Great Price and the Book of Abraham, all that sort of stuff. It was never meant to be just the Book of Mormon closed and shut. The Book of Mormon is a part of that bigger claim. And so just reading the Book of Mormon is going to be underwhelming, because the only thing it does is really clarify the biblical teaching on infant baptism. Like that's the one big theological thing that it goes, the Bible? No, wrong. Don't baptize children. It's an abomination.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
Sorry to
so
throw that at you.
No, I mean, there's a lot there. One, like the anti-Catholic sentiment in the Book of Mormon, even before I was like Googling stuff, I heard that and I was like, oh, he's talking about Catholics.
Yeah.
And that's a common thing in like 19th century American religion. They hated the Catholics, and I don't know why. I'm so intrigued by it. I need to read a book just dedicated to that. I don't know
I'm
what
not sure why.
Yeah, but it was common with them. It was also common, like that same sentiment was there in the early writings of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and I'm sure it's with other denominations as well. But that's fascinating and maybe horrifying that might be what's undergirding the kind of pivot that the LDS Church is making, is that it's for a political cause to be bedfellows with the larger Christian world.
I think it is, because to be honest, like if you look at Google Maps right now and you look for an LDS church, you used to see an angel Moroni.
Right.
You now see a cross. There were talks in the past about how the cross is not a sign we use, because like if someone shot your cousin, you wouldn't celebrate. You wouldn't use the sign of the gun, right? We don't celebrate the way Christ was killed. We celebrate the fact that he rose from the dead.
One reason we do not emphasize the cross as a symbol stems from our biblical roots. Because crucifixion was one of the Roman Empire's most agonizing forms of execution, many early followers of Jesus chose not to highlight that brutal instrument of suffering.
That was always a big selling point in Mormonism. That we celebrate the resurrected Christ. We celebrate the victory over the grave. Which is great, awesome stuff, fine. But then they've kind of backpedaled on some of that because they now want to appear more Christian. And now you've got younger Mormons saying, "Oh no, there was never a thing saying you couldn't wear a cross." I mean, the way Mormons gaslight themselves is incredible. Like, honestly, people that did read the church, like the youth pamphlet that said it is immodest to show your shoulders, and now getting hold of the new style garments, if you've heard about this, that are sleeveless, and going, "Oh, sleeves were never about modesty." I'm like, they absolutely were.
Right.
And people were absolutely shamed. Like young women who were showing shoulder were made to, in some cases, made to wear baggy t-shirts when they went to church social events to cover up.
Yeah.
And like, oh, it was never about. It absolutely was. But people will just kind of gaslight themselves. It's crazy.
So, I mean, for me as an outsider and for me as an atheist, I'm fascinated and perplexed by how Mormonism stands in the world right now. And it's clear that Mormonism is evolving quickly. I know that Latter-day Saints wouldn't say that. They would say that it's the same as it's always been. But for those of us on the outside, it looks like it's undergoing a little bit of a revolution. And there's a part of me that's like, I don't really care if some younger, more zealous Latter-day Saints come in and they're wet behind the ears and they want to pretend like this was always the case. There's a part of me that's like, whatever cognitive dissonance you have about it, I'm okay with it. Like, however you find to justify it, I just want you guys to do the right thing. So if you're stepping in that right direction, hallelujah. It's. I think I'm okay with it. However, I'm sure for older Latter-day Saints and for people who have been really burned by the church, it looks and feels like much more blatant hypocrisy.
Right.
But for me as an outsider who hasn't like experienced the pain of, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm sure that a lot of former Latter-day Saints feel like a sense of betrayal by their communities. For those people, it's like, hey, man, I got kicked out of my church for doing the things that you guys are now parading around, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that stings a lot more. For me as somebody on the outside, it's like, if you guys want to claim that this has always been the case, like, have at it. I'm just happy you're changing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I get that. And so pragmatically, I can look at it and go, hey, this is a step in the right direction. Like, women aren't feeling like they have to cover their shoulders anymore. We're policing what women wear slightly less. This is great. But it fails to recognize the very real suffering and experience of women who found these standards difficult, who were shamed over wanting to not conform to these standards or whatever it was. But yeah, questions about the Book of Mormon, Jared? Because I don't want to lose that.
I have so many questions. I feel like you've already cleared up some things, and truthfully, I'm kind of shocked. If those are the biggest criticisms of my video, because I've been ready to just be crucified all over again for like my idiotic ramblings. I did my best to try to like briefly fact check crap, but not super well. So
I think the thing is you reacted generally to themes within the book that are like, you didn't say, and then this person did this thing which doesn't make sense. You didn't speak to a lot of the individual sort of stuff. So there wasn't really much to fact check particularly. There's just a couple of like basic things, but like, you know, you basically talked about your experience reading it, which I can't fact check that. You felt how you felt and you reacted how you reacted, right?
Sure.
I'm not going to say that your take on it's invalid. If you call it boring, I'm not going to say, well, no, it's not, because how does one decide that objectively, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why there isn't really much. I mean, people will crucify you over that video, I'm sure, and fine, but I feel no reason to, because you're coming at it from an atheist perspective, right?
Yeah. It is.
You're someone who doesn't believe in God looking at a religious text going, I don't believe it. And I'm like, oh, so shocked.
Shocked Pikachu emoji.
Exactly. Yeah.
It is funny, with that phenomenon, because I'm doing this like across the board with every, denomination or sect that I can get my hands on. And so, the same people who will watch that video and then, make a 20-minute response video to it, they'll be cheering me on from the sidelines when I'm going after the Jehovah's Witnesses or after, Apostle Catherine or whoever else. And so that's always kind of like an important thing to keep in the back of your mind. There always is a counterpoint. And I never want to shut down the discussion to that counterpoint.
And they're always like, oh, he just doesn't understand. He just doesn't know Mormonism well enough, right? Whereas someone like me, they'll try and accuse me of that, and I'll be like, do you see my seminary graduation diploma behind you? Like my, my study of Mormonism certificate, the fact that I went on a mission, the fact that I taught Sunday school since I was like 14. Like, they can't do that. They can't undermine my Mormon cred. So they just go after me because I betrayed them, right? I'm a traitor to Mormonism or whatever. Like, apologists, you can still be chummy with apologists if you want. They'll still give you the time of day. They'll still be like, oh, this is the poor atheist guy, just doesn't understand, and we can convince him. Whereas me, I'm the Antichrist because I've dared speak out against some of the things within my own religion that I thought were difficult and problematic. So
it does kind of...
It's a difference there.
Yeah, that will forever be something that grieves me, is the way in which ex-members are treated.
No, you just enjoy your view from the sideline. Just enjoy not having sufficient skin in the game so that people don't like properly wheel out the vitriol. I mean, some people probably will, but like, by and large, you can still be friends with everyone. This whole non-resistant atheist thing, like, well, I'm just not convinced, but cool, fine. And it's a really nice approach. But when someone's like, well, you were convinced and now you're not, and that's a threat to me and my ability to remain convinced, so I've got to just tear you down, otherwise your existence threatens my sense of security. Like, that's where some of that comes from. Like, if I can't disprove you, then the nihilism will kick in and I'm gonna spiral and it's terrible, right? So that's where they got to go for me. But you being an atheist, just not believing it, they're like, oh, well, atheists exist, they just haven't worked it out yet. Anyway, well, I'm done psychoanalyzing apologists.
That's very fair. Well, I look forward to my conversations with the apologists, because it is kind of a win-win situation. They can take comfort in the fact that they're illuminating my understanding on the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith's ministry, and I'm eager to learn. So tit for tat, man.
Let's give them some ammunition whereby, you ask me some things about the Book of Mormon, I'll give you an answer, and I'll be like, well, actually, Nemo was wrong. And then you can have a further illuminating
Oh,
conversation.
perfect. Then I can be
Mhm.
corrected in 2 videos.
Exactly, right?
Awesome.
It's just what your ego needs.
Honestly, I need to be knocked down a few pegs. I deserve it. My biggest question about the Book of Mormon, as somebody who lived in this world and was very passionate and devout for several years, where is the beauty in the Book of Mormon? Because I missed it.
By beauty, do you mean like literary beauty?
Anything. Like when a missionary talks about, they stand up on stage at a fast and testimony Sunday and they say, I testify that this is the most true book ever written,
Mhm.
right? And they will often talk about how beautiful it is. What the hell are they talking about?
Ah,
I mean, can you rewind the tapes for me? I'm talking to
I'm trying to,
16-year-old Nemo now.
yeah. I don't think, what did I find beautiful about the Book of Mormon? It's difficult. Like for me, some of it was a sense of being right. Like this is the book that proves I'm right and other Christians are wrong. This is the book that reaffirms my worldview is the correct one. This is the book that makes me feel secure about my beliefs.
Yeah.
That's what, and that sounds really cynical. And maybe I'm the wrong person to answer that question. When you do talk to apologists, they'll be able to tell you what's beautiful about it. And I'm really fascinated to hear their answer.
Sure.
Because
Sure.
for me, it would just invoke those positive feelings of the spirit, which I've been told with the spirit by missionaries or by my parents. It would invoke those feelings. And that would make me feel like, yeah, well, I'm secure and I'm right and I know what's going to happen. And, I mean, King Benjamin's address is pretty beautiful. It's some of the best sort of Christianity in the book. I really like that. I really appreciate that. That's some of the best sort of stuff in there about, looking out for the poor and being really Christian. That for me is where some of that beauty is, I guess, is that message.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I had to give an answer to that.
Talk to me about how you think Joseph Smith's theology evolved, because the Book of Mormon was his first work. It was his first theological work. And the thing that struck me about the Book of Mormon was that it's largely orthodox, like little o orthodox. I mean, if I were to remove all the context around the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith and just like make everyone forget the history behind it, you burn Doctrines and Covenants. I think that most evangelicals, if they just read like a snippet, just a couple of pages of the Book of Mormon, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's fake, but it's some compelling 19th century fan fiction,
It's not
like
like
a nice
groundbreaking.
Christian novel." Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like fairly in line with general Christian teachings, at least
Yeah.
on my initial read.
Because like you said, because it doesn't contain any of the really controversial stuff.
Right.
It's
Right.
not really heresy and kind. I mean, there's two things about Joseph Smith's evolving theology. Like the first is real quick, is that he went from a modal view of God to the Mormon view of God, that they're distinct persons, between the sort of 1830 edition of the Book of Mormon and the 1837 edition of the Book of Mormon, right? And that seems to track with the different accounts of the first vision. You've got the 1832 account of the first vision where he sees one person, and then you've got the 1838 account, which is the one that the missionaries will read you, where he sees two distinct personages, right? So his theology changed between those years. He went from a modal view of God to the Mormon view of God, where you've got this Godhead of three distinct beings. They're not consubstantial in any way. They're not, one God in three modes or anything like that. And you've got scriptures that change, that go from being the mother of God to the mother of the Son of God, right?
How did that? Do you know the story there? How that got changed?
To know, other than it's part of Joseph's changing theology, it's hard to know exactly why. I'm not an expert on why that changed and how that was received. But I know Joseph's preaching about God over time did change, and you end up with the King Follett sermon where he starts teaching the most crazy stuff about deification, about that's like right towards the end of his life. He's really
so I mean he just straight up changed it and hoped that no one would notice.
Well, I'm not even sure he hoped that no one noticed. I think one of, again, the core claims of the church is that it's a church of continuing revelation. It's a church of having a living prophet. And the point of a living prophet is they can receive the word of God and add to it. That's why you have the Doctrine and Covenants, just in adding to this sort of open canon of scripture, right? So these changes that the church tries to deny now, or certainly has tried to deny in the past, may not have even been denied during the time of Joseph Smith. It may have just been seen as further unfolding of the sort of light and knowledge of what Joseph Smith was receiving and establishing the church, right? It gets trickier after his death because he's seen as the sort of charismatic leader. He's the sort of lightning rod through which all this revelation comes and through which God is restoring his church. Once he's gone, it's then you end up with sort of more caretaker prophets who are trying to kind of guide the church.
Yeah.
He's like the founder, and yeah, then it's caretaker prophets. Sort of, they're less dynamic. I mean, they're still making these sorts of revelations and claims to speak for God, but less of it's recorded as like a book of scripture. Like Doctrine and Covenants has only been added to a couple of times since Joseph Smith died. There's not much in there that isn't his. Whereas if you look at Community of Christ, one of the other major LDS movement groups, their Doctrine and Covenants just keeps growing and growing.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Oh man, I can't wait to go and explore them.
Yes. They're a good group. They're like they're the soft liberal version of the sort of main Mormon group. They're like they've just ordained a female prophet.
Yeah, I saw that.
Stacey Cram.
So fascinating. Is she hated by like Latter-day Saints generally?
No.
Really?
And it's so funny when you hear interviews with her and with other people from Community of Christ about like what you'd call the Brighamite group of Mormonism, right? The people that follow Brigham Young. They're a bit just like, well, they do their thing, we do our thing. We think we're right. Just chill. Like, they think they did the right thing, waiting for Joseph Smith III and letting it go through the sort of inheritance. They are the group that didn't think that they should follow Brigham Young. There's also the other groups that followed. There's like the Bickertonite group and other, offshoots. Like Mormonism's got a ton of offshoots. Because, like you said, like it's far more common than people realize that someone goes, well, hang on, no, now God's speaking to me. There's an example of it in Doctrine and Covenants where a guy kind of is running around going, hey, I've got a seer sown too, and I'm getting revelation. And Joseph Smith shuts it down in Doctrine and Covenants and goes, no, I'm the only one that gets to do this. You get back in your lane. He has to kind of like quell this, like everyone's running and go, well, I've got a seer stone too, or I've got this. I'm speaking to God too. And he's like, whoa, no, just me. Chill out. Well, what's your final question about the Book of Mormon, Jared? Let's get your final question. Because as much as the people would love to hear us talk for hours on this stuff, I want to be respectful of your time and the viewers' time and leave them wanting more.
Leave them wanting more. What do you think Joseph Smith's intentions were with the Book of Mormon? How do you see him as a prophet?
I just talked about being respectful of people's time, and now we've got to spend half an hour digging into why did Joseph Smith do it? Why? Just possibly the biggest question is like, why did he do it? This is not what I would have thought even like a year ago. I've kind of changed a lot about my views. I think he was swimming in waters that were telling similar stories, right?
Right.
The narrative of the Book of Mormon being about ancient Jews that came to America, or just ancient white people that built the civilizations that the ruins or remnants of were being observed by these settlers. It's a racist idea, but it's what was swimming at the time. I think Joseph Smith wanted to have a part in that story, in that sort of tradition of his time. He was big into folk magic. He had a magical worldview. It was the autumn equinox when he'd go and try and get the plates every year, right? These things were, I think it was the autumn equinox, or was he married on the autumn equinox? Anyway, he had a Jupiter talisman. There's all this like magic worldview stuff in his life. He's swimming in these fantastical stories. He's a good storyteller. So I think he wants to tell a story that's part of this bigger narrative. And I think there's a feeling of grandeur in that. And I don't think you can underestimate the harshness of that American life. Even in that fairly well-established part of America, it was still a difficult existence. And if you could find a way to get people to follow you and revere you and to build up a community around you and create some sort of cohesion and some sort of safety, like I can see the attraction in that, Like a farm boy, ends up with a mansion house in a city in Nauvoo, or a town maybe it was at the time, where he is the governor, he is the general, he is, the judge. He's like everything. He becomes important. And I'm not an expert in his life or his motivations. You could read No Man Knows My History, you can read Rough Stone Rolling, you can read these books about Joseph Smith, and you'd probably get a better insight into who he is than maybe I understand. But certainly just thinking about it, I can see the appeal of that. I can see one of the reasons he maybe doesn't teach in the Book of Mormon is because he uses it as this thing, as this tool to get people to believe his claims, and then wants to move away from it and just keep moving forward. I don't want to be like, oh, Joseph Smith was just a con man who wanted to con people out of money. Some people will take that view, and that's their opinion. But I can at least see some of the more sympathetic reasons as to why a young boy would want to, or a young man would want to start up a community in order to, maybe people think I'm being too nice to him, but that's like the secular explanation, right? Or he was just genuinely believed he was called of God to do these things.
That
happened, but
that one's really difficult for me to believe. In thinking about like some of the early Gnostic texts that I was comparing the Book of Mormon to, there's always the scholarly question of like, well, were these people just transmitting stories that they heard that just kind of, slowly evolved and kind of were pulled out of thin air? And the Gnostic Gospels are like faithful transmissions of those earlier stories. Or did Joe down the street just go, hey, I don't really like the Jesus in Matthew, I'm just gonna make a new one?
And I want to know what happened to Jesus before he was 12, so I'm gonna write my own story about it.
Yeah. And so, and then the question is like, well, if somebody just made it up, like, is there any motive? I mean, you could conceivably say like, oh no, like God gave me this revelation. But it just seems like you have to be like fooling yourself to believe that. It almost certainly seems to me like the effort with which Joseph Smith went through making the Book of Mormon, that either it's true and to the hurrahs of my Latter-day Saint friends, or it was done out of malice. It's really difficult for me to imagine it in like a charitable light. But
I guess I find that easier. As someone in my position. But I can also see the argument that he was a con man. Like I can see it. And I think some of those motivations I described would still apply even if he was doing it maliciously, right? He's like, well, I want to better my situation. And if I can, because he has a proven track record before of pretending to find buried objects in the ground or claiming to be able to find them and getting people to pay him even when he says, oh, sorry, a spirit moved it, it's not there anymore. Right? He managed to pull that off and make that happen. So there is then previous for people to go, all right, well, he knows he can get money out of people with these storytelling abilities and his ability to convince them of his abilities. So maybe that's he decided that's going to be his way of making a living.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that unlocks that or any other variation of that is realizing, and this is why the church doesn't want you to tell us, because the martyrdom of Joseph Smith is like a big thing to prove that, well, no man would go to his death for something he didn't truly believe in. But actually, when you understand the true situation around the martyrdom of Joseph Smith, you realize that he's fighting back. He's trying to escape. He's not just standing there being burnt at the stake like Abinadi, who you now know who that is, and you've read his story.
Vaguely.
Bad King Noah. But Abinadi stands there, lets himself get burnt so that then Alma the elder can see him being burnt and go, oh, I don't like that, and run off and baptize people at the waters of Mormon, right? That's what you've got going on there. Joseph Smith wasn't doing that. He was fighting back. He was holding the door. He was trying to escape. He was trying to call to Freemasons as he jumped out the window to try and get it to stop. And he died. and he died because he got too big for his boots and destroyed a printing press, right? So you can absolutely see the other side of that once you understand that his martyrdom wasn't a martyrdom in the traditional sense. You know, he's not the monk that set himself on fire and sat there.
Right.
He's not that kind of martyr. Yes, he was killed over his religious beliefs, but it was his religious beliefs that caused him to do something that caused him to be in jail. So it's just, I guess what I'm saying is more complex, and that a lot of that feeds into them being able to understand why Joseph maybe would have done it, and ultimately why he was killed isn't just because people went, Mormonism bad, let's kill him.
Right.
It's like,
right.
this guy is, you know, starting to kind of turn into a bit of a sort of dictator in a town. He's declaring martial law and all sorts. Like, that's maybe dangerous. But
well, I'll give a pitch and say that I look forward to hearing the retort from all of my Latter-day Saint friends.
Yeah, I look forward to people coming into the comments disagreeing. I think people should go over and watch your video and check it out and see what they think of it. I think it's very good. It's very watchable. Clearly, the YouTube algorithm agrees. It's doing well. If this video can get half the views that video got, then we'll be doing all right. We'll be cooking. But I doubt it will. But if you want it to, make sure you like. Make sure you do all the things that the algorithm love. Even if you really dislike this video, leave a comment that's really not very nice, because all engagement's good engagement, guys. This is what you have to understand.
That's true.
So, argue in the comments amongst yourselves. It's the way of the world. But thank you very much, Jared, for coming on and taking the time to talk to me. I'm glad that you came on and were willing to talk about your video.
This has been wildly illuminating, man. I appreciate you endlessly.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to collaborating for a while. So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. If you like this video, there is a button specifically for that. And if you want to tell me what you think of me or of our conversation, or just whatever in the comments, go argue with some people. Go be nice to each other in the comments, preferably, is what we really want. Thank you very much for watching. And YouTube probably thinks you'll like this video here, so watch that one next.